Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, my dear colleague, Mr. Štefanec, I'm really happy to be with you this morning and thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a privilege to share my view with you about this important topic. We've got Lisbon Treaty as an important tool to use by national parliaments right now. We know that we live in a period in which everything is changing around us. There is a very old saying that nothing is permanent except of change, and we know it particularly right now, what's going on in the European Union, and we have to face these changes, we have to face these challenges. From a contents point of view, there are basically three challenges we have to face. First one is basically how to deal with consequences of financial and debt crisis, which still we feel in most countries. Secondly, how we face demographic development in Europe. And thirdly, what are the new rules for economical governance. And we know, and I absolutely agree with my colleague Luděk, I share his view that the Hungarian presidency was very successful in terms of set up new rules, set up new economical governance rules, which are very, very important. I mean, Euro Plus Pact, I mean, European semester establishment. It's really crucial right now. Well, we've got Lisbon Treaty, roughly 1.5 years in practice, and Lisbon Treaty basically replaced Nice, Amsterdam, and Maastricht treaties in order to simplify the legislative process in Europe, in order to give new tools, particularly to the national parliaments and also to the European Parliament. It's now up to us in the national parliaments how to use these tools, because we've got now really the challenge to use it, and now it's very much about cooperation among national parliaments, how to use this tool, particularly subsidiarity and proportionality control. Let me give you some figures. In 2010, there was like 82 draft legislative proposals coming from European Commission, and there were more than 380, exactly 387 opinions coming from national parliaments. If we have a look to the history in period from 2006 until 2009, there was altogether 618 opinions. So once again, in 2010, 387, which is only in 1 year, it is really very important increase. In terms of fields, there were most opinions sent in the field of agriculture, altogether 13, home affairs 9, and internal market and services 7. If you can have a look to the countries, the most active parliament was the Polish Senate with 4 opinions, followed by Swedish Parliament and United Kingdom House of Commons with 3 opinions. Well, if we have a look to the draft legislative proposals, which were most criticized or most in the center of opinions, it was already mentioned draft directive for seasoned workers, altogether with 8 reasoned opinion, and recently CCCTB, so Consolidated Corporate Tax Base, with altogether 13 reasoned opinion. However, I have to point out that still there was no yellow card used. There was still not enough 18 points which should be reached for using at least the yellow card. But it was really very close, and I do believe it's a very important signal to have at least 13 points, because we have to take into consideration that we have 27 countries and altogether we have 40 chambers. So it is really the matter of fact that there is very, very high standpoint and very high challenge to cooperate among parliaments. And based on my experience, I think really it starts to work. It starts after 1 year, it starts to work, because this tool, it creates pressure to cooperation among parliaments. Based on my experience, we have the best experience among so-called V4 countries, so Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary and Poland. I'm happy to say that we meet regularly on half-year basis, and on top of that we meet on a COSAC platform. It is basically the institutional forum where all European committees from every national parliament in the European Union meet together on half-year basis. Recently we met in Budapest in May, and also I found it quite productive meeting. We shared the opinion, we shared our experience from the process, which is so important. Maybe let me say also one remark. Lisbon Treaty gives more power to national parliament, but also Lisbon Treaty gives more power to the European Parliament. And my opinion is, despite the fact that national parliaments understand what is the role and they start to be really active, it is not really the point in terms of European Parliament. In my view, European Parliament starts to fight for more and more power. And it was quite visible at last two COSAC meetings in Brussels and in Budapest. I felt a lot of tensions between Euro Parliament and between national parliaments. There was roughly half time of all, in terms of all points, half-time debate, what is the competence of the European Parliament and what is the competence of national parliaments. I think it is not really quite sure, particularly from the point of view of European Parliament. Well, it is really now, as I said, up to national parliaments, but I see this co-creation and co-shaping of the European policy in two ways, from national parliament point of view. First method is to put the pressure on the national governments, because there is still a lot of interaction and there is still a lot of power from national parliaments focusing on national governments. I can share my experience from Slovakia. We have a constitutional law from 2004 based on which we cooperate as the National Council of the Slovak Republic and Slovak government. And there is a relatively very strong competence of the national parliament, because before every European Council meeting, every member of government, including Prime Minister, has to come to the Parliament, has to come to the Euro Committee meeting, asking for approval for the position which will be represented at the European Council meeting. It gives the power to the Parliament to not only to discuss, but to co-create the position of the Slovak government, and I found it as the very, very powerful tool towards government, because government at the European Council meetings really they can not only discuss, but they really can make very important decisions. Second method or second way is really the subsidiarity and proportionality check, and this is once again the tool which is mostly about cooperation between parliaments. As I said, from a subsidiarity point of view, the most successful cooperation with 13 points was the CCCTB directive. And let me touch it briefly, because I think it was a very typical directive for current days. At the beginning of my contribution, I mentioned these three challenges, like economical governance, pension reforms or demographic development, and consequences of debt crisis. I think everybody in Europe, everybody in countries face these challenges, and we are trying to look for the right answer. And I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, the answer is not really in centralization, because there is really still a lot of opinions, a lot of view, particularly coming from Brussels, that now we still have difficulties. We will solve it via more centralized approach, via centralization. I do not think it is the right way. I do believe the answer is in cooperation, not in centralization, but in cooperation. And this is again the pressure to the national parliaments, how to cooperate together, and of course how governments and our representatives are able to cooperate together. I do believe this is the way how we can overcome current crisis, and also I think it is the way how we can face current challenges, how we can restart the growth and how we can improve the quality of lives of our citizens. And this consolidated tax-based directive is the very good example, because it starts to touch something what was untouchable. And I do believe we should not touch tax policy, which should be still in the competence of national governments. I think our challenge is to cooperate on the standardization of accounting principles, for example, or sharing our diplomas, sharing our education basis. But I do believe that in terms of tax decisions, tax policy, and also in terms of social matters, the competencies should stay on the national level. I think it should be the key principle which should be not touched, and this directive is going over this very important line. And not only this directive was, I'm afraid, was coming with the proposal that it will bring more administration, which is not really the way how to go ahead, because we have currently in the European Union 27 tax systems. If this directive would be applied, as a matter of fact, we would have 28 systems, so there will be not less but more administration burden for the business and also for citizens. And last but not least, speaking about this directive, the consequence is very unclear in terms of contribution to the growth. I'm afraid that we should not come with so centralized approach, but we should support internal competitiveness. If we are fighting for the growth, if we would like to support the growth in the European Union, we should be believers that we need also the internal competition. There is nothing wrong with internal competitiveness. It is good input for the total growth. So this directive was something more than only one draft proposal. It was quite typical approach which should be discussed widely, and I do hope that these 13 points coming from altogether 9 countries will be a strong signal that it is not the way how we go ahead and how we overcome current situation. So at the end, once again, let me emphasize the point that currently in the changing situation, really the tool is here. Lisbon Treaty gives the tool to the national parliament how to touch European policy, how to influence it, and really it's up to the national parliaments only how to use it. I do believe that through mutual cooperation, this tool will be more and more and in better way used. Thank you very much.